Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Laura and today I am doing a very belated Manga Monday video. This is a video series that I do every second and every fourth Monday of the month, sort of, or haven't really kept my schedule since, I don't know, the summer. And I've had a really hard time kind of getting back into it. So I have missed the last two, and I am now catching up. So this isn't actually my regular Manga Monday schedule. That would actually be next week again. So what I'm going to try and do is, until then, I'm going to try and catch up with the ones that I've missed. So I've only missed two. The one I'm going to do today is science fiction manga. So I'm going to talk about some science fiction manga that are fun to read, things that you might be interested in reading. Some of these titles are going to be out of print, some of them are in print, some of them are new, some of them are old. Just sort of a mix of some things that are in my collection, a little bit of everything, I think, and just sort of titles that I have read in the past that I like to share. Science fiction is difficult for me to recommend because it is one of the genres in my collection that I read the least of. I have a pretty good size collection of science fiction manga, but it is a topic that I have a hard time picking up. I'm not as motivated to pick up. I always enjoy the stories when I read them, but there is also an element to science fiction that I really don't like. More so I think in prose and in film, but it sort of carries on into manga as well. So I do tend to kind of avoid science fiction unless I'm really forcing myself to do that or to read it, or I'm actually not aware that I'm reading science fiction at the time. So knowing that I'm not much of a science fiction reader, I do have some science fiction recommendations for you. When I was going to post this is actually going to happen right before I was going to wrap up the tome Infinity and Beyond readathon, which I had participated in, which was an all science fiction readathon. I am going to probably still talk about those titles as well. These are different titles than the ones that I read during that readathon, so I wanted to kind of give you a lot of titles to hear about. And anyway, I'm just going to get into it and discuss these titles, and hopefully, even though it's coming from someone whose science fiction is not their passion, hopefully you'll find something interesting to read. So the first title I want to recommend is actually a classic robot story, and that happens to be Astro Boy by Osamu Tezuka. This is basically the story, sort of a Frankenstein-esque story, where a scientist experiences a tragedy. His son is killed in an accident, I believe, and through his grief he decides to create Astro Boy, sort of a replica of his son. Astro Boy, of course, is sort of a super robot. He has many different things that he can do. Shoot bullets out of his tail. He can fly with rocket boots. He has I think he has laser eyes. I can't remember all of the magic things that he has, or all of the robotic abilities that he has, but this is really just a story about this now robot who has been created. But he's been created with a conscience, and so instead of sort of fulfilling the role that he's expected, he wants to actually do good and help others. And so he's often kind of trying to save the world while also trying to escape from the bad guys. It's just very classic Saturday morning cartoon style story. I think it's a whole lot of fun to read. You don't have to read the whole thing, but it is certainly a lot of fun. It is available. It's no longer available in these small single volumes, but you can now pick it up in omnibus size volumes, still this very tiny trim size, so they're a little bit awkward to read, but it is also available digitally on different platforms, including free on Hoopla if your library has the Hoopla resource, so you could definitely read it on there for free if that's something that you're able to do. I would definitely recommend it. It's super fun, super happy, puts me in a good mood, and definitely a good thing to read, Saturday morning with your glass of orange juice. The next title that I would recommend is also about a child. It's Gunslinger Girl by Aida. This is a 15-volume series. The one I'm holding up here is from ADV Manga, but it is also released by Seven Seas. I think it's still in print. I'm not 100% sure, but they do have a digital app, so if it's available digitally, I'll certainly link it up down below. I really enjoy this series. I think it is really clever and really thought-provoking. It's basically the story about a number of young children, kind of around 12 years old. Some are slightly different ages, but they've all experienced a very significant trauma to the point that they have either been saved or sold by the people who are in charge of them to this secret kind of government organization, a sort of a mercenary organization. This is an organization that is probably, I think, fighting terrorism. I think that's sort of a safe thing to assume. So these children have been taken and they've been physically modified as cyborgs. Many of them have, like, this is the only way that they would have survived another even a week, is to have this major modification. So they've become cyborgs, they've been reconditioned and brainwashed so they don't remember their past lives, but they are still small children, and now they've been trained as, you know, these cyborg assassins, and so they are sent out on missions with their handlers, who are usually older men, and sent out on these missions to kind of accomplish certain goals. The men are sort of having kind of different experiences with handling these young girls and sort of the morals of what it is they're actually doing, and should they actually be taking these children and doing this kind of experimentation on them, despite the fact that they're getting these certain types of results, because these children still do have minds and still do have emotions. So it is a very interesting story. Plus then there's this whole terrorism backstory to this, and most of it is set in Italy, so it has a very different setting for a lot of manga as well. So it's just a really unique manga. I think the characters are fantastic. The story is really, really developed, and the world building is fantastic. The whole thing, I just think, from, you know, start to finish is just fantastic. It's just really, really great, and the ending in particular is one of the really just cathartic and satisfying, but also so satisfying, the ending. I really enjoyed the series, and I think you should check it out. It's worth reading. This is the only title that I did read for the tome Infinity and Beyond, but I wanted to recommend it here. It is a very short title. It's just a single volume, but I thought it was worth reading, and you should check it out. That is Voices of a Distant Star by Makoto Shinkai and art by Mizu Sahara. So this is what the cover looks like. For the readathon, I actually read this new vertical release as well as the Tokyo Pop release, which I'd actually been given just a couple of weeks after I had picked this up, but I hadn't read either of them before, so I decided that since it was a single volume, I would literally hold one in one hand and one in the other and read them both side by side, and it was a very surreal kind of experience because I don't think a single bubble, a single panel was translated identically. They were all completely different, so one of them was more probably using more natural language, and one of them was using more of a direct translation, and sometimes the natural language was better and sometimes the direct translation I thought was better. So I really wish it was sort of a combination of the two. Neither of them were bad, but I did think that this one was just slightly better. But yeah, there's kind of going back and forth. It was like, I want to choose this bubble for that one, I want to choose that bubble for that one. At any rate, it was an experience. This is the story, basically, of a young girl. She has been chosen to fight in an intergalactic war, and basically has developed a relationship with a young man on Earth, and she is now being sent out into space. And the distance that she has to go out into space in order to fight this war is basically lengthening the time that the communication between her friend on Earth and her. So, you know, she's sending text messages back and forth with him, and, you know, at the beginning it'll take a day before the message gets there, then it's a week, then it's a month, then it's 6 months. So this long delay between their connection is kind of being stretched while she goes out into space. And as she does sort of leave out into space, Earth is starting to forget her, and so it's a very sad and melancholic and kind of romantic type story, and I just thought it was really, really beautiful, the story. I really loved it. There's some really nice characters in it, but it is definitely more of a slow, sad built story with a little bit of kind of contemplating war even. There's a lot of thoughts about what is war and why are we doing this, and who is on the side of right. All of those kind of questions are also being asked in this. So it is, I think, a very solid story within a single volume, and definitely worth checking out. The next title that I'm recommending, I've only actually read the first, like, 1.5 volumes. I have really enjoyed these first 1.5, and I'm looking forward to reading more, but there are about 9 volumes out. It is complete. And this is a seinen manga. There is quite a lot of grit and gore, and it's certainly not for the faint of heart. This is Inuyasha Key by Hiroya Oku. This is the same creator as Gantz, which I have not read as well. But this one is very unique in that it features, at least in this first volume, an elderly gentleman. In this beginning story, he is an older man who is kind of lost, and he's kind of lost his grip on his family. He's lost his connection with his daughter. He's, I believe he's lost his job. He's found out that he's ill. Everything is just sort of built on itself, and he just feels incredibly pathetic, incredibly worthless and helpless. And there's a situation where all of a sudden a spaceship comes down, crash lands, sort of, and he is reborn, but he's reborn with basically an entirely new interior, in more than, I would say, a cyborg, so maybe like an alien type technology. I haven't read enough to know exactly what has happened, but now he has this inner power and an inner ability, and immediately ends up kind of starting out to fight for justice, to be kind of a warrior for those who are just as downtrodden as he is. So I thought the beginning of this was just really fantastic. I have read a little bit further, and certainly the continuing on the story, there are some really graphic scenes that maybe will not be suitable for a lot of people. There's certainly, I think in the second volume, there's some graphic rape. There's certainly going to be a lot of blood and other kind of gross things going on, but just be cautious when you're picking this up, that if that's something that disturbs you, that you should probably avoid this. It is rated 16 plus, but from the beginning it really has me hooked, and I'm really excited about reading it, particularly because now we have this senior citizen who is basically a superhero, and I'm all in it for that because this is such a rare combination. There is another character who I have not more than like kind of superficially met, who I believe is a Gantz otaku, who also is sort of in that same place, the wrong place at the wrong time, and also has experienced this new body. So I believe that he's probably going to be the antithesis of this elderly gentleman, and they are going to quarrel at some point. I believe that's probably what's going to happen, but this is a great start to a manga. I'm super excited to keep reading it, and I think that you should check it out if it sounds like something you'd be into. I am going to recommend this again, and I recommend this, I think, fairly frequently, and I'm going to continue recommending it until everybody has read it, and that is Dr. Slump by Akira Toriyama. I love Dr. Slump. It is one of my favorite things. You can see there's a Really-chan on the cover. This is my favorite illustration by Akira Toriyama. I just absolutely love this illustration, a Really-chan in profile, with a surprisingly high-detailed helmet and hair. It's just wonderful. This is basically a very similar story, I would say, to Astro Boy. It is about a girl robot who's been created by her inventor father. There are a number of other really silly characters, but she just sort of this unassuming little girl, and you know, has superhuman strength. And she goes around and fights bad guys and just has this really great quirky personality. She often is chasing bad guys with a poo on a stick. I can't even explain to you. It's very slapstick, it's very silly, it's very Akira Toriyama's humor. This one is certainly more humorous than Dragon Ball, but it definitely is Akira Toriyama. And Aurelie-chan does make an appearance actually in Dragon Ball a little bit later, so if you read Dragon Ball you can come back here and now kind of find the origin of, at least of, Aurelie-chan's story. So I love her. I think she's just a fantastic character. She's so much fun. This is such a silly, stupid comedy, and it's just, I don't know, it's just worthwhile. It's just fun and enjoyable and lighthearted about an inventor who, kind of a pathetic guy who invents kind of weird things and has this crazy robot daughter, and it's just fun. I really, really like it, so I would definitely recommend checking this out. Of course, caution to know that there's a lot of toilet humor in here. It is intended as shonen manga, so that kind of flavors it, but even that is funny. And then this title is out of print, but I would really recommend checking it out if you have a chance. It's only 6 volumes long, and that is Karakuri Odette. This is by Julietta Suzuki. This is the same author as Kami-sama Kiss, if you're aware of that series, but this one is about a cyborg girl. Basically, she, again, has been invented by a scientist, and she's been invented with emotions and feelings and wants, and one of the things that she wants to do, she wants to go to school and experience life as a teenager, because she's been basically created as this teenager person. So the scientist who has invented her, or her father, has now sending her off to school to enjoy life as a teenager, and because she is quite naive, she gets into a lot of sticky situations. This is really just a story about friendship and finding your place and kind of fitting in. It's just a fun, good, nice story, and it's really enjoyable. Odette, of course, comes from the fairy tale Swan Lake, and Odette is the swan. I'm not entirely sure I remember why this is actually, or how this is sort of inspired by Swan Lake, or how I can see the inspiration. I know that when I was reading this before I was noticing it, I have a feeling that it's a lot about her being Odette, who is the princess, being transformed as a swan and kind of blending in with the rest of the swans. I have a feeling that's sort of what this story is, but I can't remember exactly, but I know that that was where that's coming from. At any rate, this is a lot of fun, cute shoujo manga, mostly about friendship, light on the romance, which is kind of more unusual, I think, for shoujo manga, but really good title, and you should definitely check it out if you're into shoujo manga. And then the last title that I recommend that you check out is Akira by Katsuhiro Otomo. This is a wonderful series, and you should definitely check it out, even if you don't think that you would be into science fiction, because it's not heavy on the science fiction. There's certainly a lot of fantastical elements, and there's certainly a lot of unbelievable ideas, but it's so incredibly well written that you have to experience it. It's so beautifully drawn, it's so cinematic. It's just a wonderful manga. I believe this is one of the longest in print in English. It may even have been in print longer than Nausicaa, which has also been out for a long time. It is currently available in a hardcover set, which is what this is, in a non-flipped Japanese reading direction box set. But I believe the box set is now no longer being reprinted, so it's out. What's out is what's available. If you don't get your hands on it now, you're out of luck. So you might want to get your hands on it, because it is so worth reading. And this set in particular is actually quite easy to read. It's got a nice sewn-in binding, so it really feels like a quality published book, unlike some hardcovers which still, even though they look like they're good publishing, they're still kind of glued in pages, or kind of lower cost publishing. So this one feels quite substantial, but it's also just a really good publication. It's a wonderful story. It's basically about, it's a number of things are going on, so it's actually kind of a complicated story, but there is a situation regarding the event that began the Third World War. So this is occurring kind of a post-apocalyptic world after this Third World War, and there was this event that happened that kick-started that war, and it has basically resurfaced, and there is a consideration that this event may occur again, which is a significant issue. At the site that this event occurred, they are planning on erecting an Olympic stadium because this is 2019 and the 2020 Olympics are coming to Tokyo, which is really hilarious because at the time of writing this, I don't think the Olympics were planned for Tokyo. So I think that's a pretty big coincidence. So the Olympics are kind of a consideration. Something happens to prevent the ongoing construction of the Olympic Stadium. There is also going on a young man who's always the boy in the picture, usually this one here, who's always, you know, riding the motorcycle. He is part of a motorcycle gang, and he witnesses a child-sized older gentleman, very wrinkly old man, but a child-sized, kind of walk ghostly in front of him and then disappear. And so this image kind of is intertwined with this situation that has something to do with the Third World War, has something to do with this Olympic Stadium incident, and because he's witnessed it now, is getting dragged into it. One of his fellow riders is also being dragged into it, but in a more significant way, and so it's just a very mysterious but also very fast-paced. There's a lot of strange things going on, a lot of things dealing with kind of human experimentation and telekinesis. Yeah, so anyway, it's a really great story. I can't go into it too far because it is pretty complicated for me to explain, but it is really worth reading, and I hope you just take my word for it. It's so worth reading. I've read it once before, and then I read it again recently for a 24-hour readathon. I read it all in one day, and it was just such a good reading experience, just sitting there and binge reading. I didn't feel like I wanted to stop. I actually wanted to just keep going. Just the way that it's written, the way that the art is drawn, it just pulls you in. The story is just so engaging. There's so much going on. So it's just really fantastic, and you should definitely be checking this one out. So those are my recommendations of science fiction manga that you should check out. Bunch of different things. Hopefully you'll find something interesting to read. Because science fiction isn't really my forte, I haven't read as much science fiction as I would like, just because I'm always sort of intimidated by it. But I really do want to read it. So if you have any recommendations for good science fiction series, particularly knowing what kind of science fiction series I've liked, let me know down in the description. I'd love to check out some new titles. Anyway, I think that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.